Zoe, thank you so much. What a lovely evening to be here. Welcome if you're joining us online as well. Great to have your company. Now, one of the images Jesus uses for us, his followers, is of the light of the world. We are the light of the world. And he tells us that what we shouldn't do is put our light under a bushel or a bowl, yeah? And so I've brought a bowl and a light, which is one of our gloriously, it won't burn the church down candles, which we've had since the curate tried to burn the church down. Here's a bowl over the light. And you can see the problem, can't you? The bowl can snuff out the light. But in our verse today, in John chapter 8, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And what you need to understand most crucially is that he's not talking about something that can be put under a bowl. And that's what I want to grab our attention with to start with. Let me begin by reading you from John chapter 1, really famous passage. You'll have heard it here at Christmas. And if you know the words, feel free to join it. You know, like how you read to a kid and they join in with the final word of a sentence? If you want to join in with any words, feel free. So in the beginning was and the Word was with, and the Word was God. He was with God through him all things were. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all humankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light. That's John the Baptist, witnessing about the light, so that through him, through the light, all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not receive him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not recognize him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor a husband's decision, or a human decision, but born of God. And they're the key words there. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light shines in the darkness. And I don't know about you, probably you've been tuning into the TV, social media, aware of darkness in the world at the moment in an acute way, yeah? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And that's partly my testimony this week. But what is this light that Jesus brings? Is it the light that he gives to little Richard driving to the Ukraine border and back? Is it the light that he gives to Zoe leading the service? Is it the light he gives to all of us to witness in our places? A glorious light, a light that stops darkness winning, but a light that can nevertheless be snuffed out? And the answer is no, it's not even comparable to that. So here we are. You're in John chapter 8, and it has this really strange thing, because in John chapter 8, verse 12, he just sort of seems to speak in a way that you just can't understand why he's saying this. Do you remember when we looked at I am the bread last week? It was really obvious, wasn't it? Why? Because he'd just turned 5 loaves and a couple of fish, or the other way around, can't remember, into enough food to feed 5,000 blokes, probably even more women, probably even more children. And so when he says, I am the bread of life, you're like, yeah. So why is he here saying, I am the light of the world, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but have the light of life? And the answer is, and here's our slide, Angie, the answer is, he is comparing himself not to a candle, but to something far more powerful. Something far more powerful. Let's flick to that. See, this is the sun. It's a gift from NASA of the sun. And the sun accounts for 99.86% of the mass of the solar system. 1 million Earths could fit into the sun. The sun creates by nuclear fission. It's almost a perfect sphere, incredibly enough. And without the sun's heat and light, the Earth would be a lifeless ball of ice-coated rock. How do I know he's comparing himself to the sun? It's because back in a chapter before, we're at the Feast of Tabernacles. And Jesus is speaking at something called the Feast of Tabernacles. And if you've ever been to New Wine, it wasn't like New Wine at all. It was even better. The party went on all night long. They basically party until dawn. And when it gets to dawn, what happens is that when it gets to dawn, what happens is the priests get up and put their back to the rising sun and bow towards the temple and proclaim, our God, Yahweh, is more powerful and more glorious than the sun. He is, Yahweh is the light of the world. God is the light of the world. So if you think about the sun is obviously the light of the world, isn't it? If you say, what is the light of the world? It's that big ball in the sky that we've just read about. This phenomenal ball, the thing that causes photosynthesis to work. Some of you are studying photosynthesis. I can't remember how it works, but it's the thing that sustains all life. Without it, we would have an ice ball of rock. And the priests in the Jewish time would put their backs to it and bow towards the temple because their ancestors had worshipped the sun, and they knew that they shouldn't worship created things. They should worship the sun, moon, and star maker, not the sun, moon, and stars. And so they bowed and worshipped it. And in the middle of this festival, Jesus gets up and says, I'm the light of the world. He might as well say, I'm God. And in fact, by the end of the chapter, he's talking to the Jews who are really upset with him for claiming to be the light of the world. And he says these words. He says, before Abraham was, I am, which is the name for Yahweh, which is the name for God. I am. See, when we're talking about Jesus, we're not talking about a snuff-outable candle. In the book of Daniel, there's this extraordinary image which I think helps us with the global events we're going on with now. Do you remember Daniel, Lion's Den, that story? Everyone remember Daniel? He was a 14-year-old boy, sort of middle upper class from Israel, captured and taken into Babylon, given a fantastic sort of boarding school education, even tried the vegetarian thing. It worked for him. He ended up strapping, handsome, could interpret dreams. Doesn't always work for people, but, it did for him. And he made his way through. And at the end of his life, having prayed for his whole life, he had a vision. And in the vision, he saw a statue which represented all the empires of the world that were going to come up over the next few years. And there was the Babylonian Empire, there was the Mede Empire, there was the Persian Empire, there was the Greek Empire, and there was the Roman Empire. And he's prophesying this in the 6th century BC, getting history right down through the ages. It's extraordinary. And all of these empires, like Putin's Russia, fall one after another. But what causes them to fall? A tiny little stone which hits the bottom of the statue, the Roman Empire. And that stone then gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that stone is the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And of the increase of his government, Isaiah says, there is no end. See, his kingdom, it gets established. His kingdom is not like a candle that can be snuffed out by a Russian maverick, horrible despot. His kingdom is more bright than the sun. And the only reason that we're not being blinded by his power and might right now is he's restraining himself. Because when he comes in glory, every knee, Russian, Ukrainian, English, Welsh, whatever, is going to bow before him. And we're going to be dazzled by him. There's a glimpse of that in the Acts of the Apostles, a man who was persecuting the church of God. He's traveling along on a donkey to go and persecute people, and then suddenly from the sky, he's blinded by a light. Not by a candle, not by a little thing you could snuff out, but by a flipping huge light. It blinds him. He's literally blind for 3 days as a result of encountering Jesus in the sky. And when Jesus returns in glory to judge the living and the dead, every eye will see him. I mean, every eye will see him. I've often wondered how that can be in a spherical world. How much light is that going to be that is going to sort of eclipse the entire spherical planet? I wondered if it was Sky TV that was the answer to that, but I don't think it is. I think it's far more dazzling than that. And we're going to be blinded by his incredible love and his light. And it's going to be our choice. You see, light actually does 2 things to you, doesn't it? We were driving along the other day, and the sun was rising. And you're like, this is the moment where I wish I hadn't left my sunglasses behind, because I'm driving into sun, and it's dazzling. It's quite hard to see. Driving backwards the other way, it was setting in my side mirror. And again, I was dazzled every time I tried to look to see if I could overtake in my 100-kilometer-an-hour restricted minibus. I was dazzled. Just the sun itself can dazzle me, but Jesus doesn't compare himself to the sun. He says he's far bigger and brighter and more amazing than the sun. The sun's just one ball in the universe. Jesus sustains the entire universe by his powerful word. That's my Savior. I wonder if you know him. That's who we put our trust in. That's the King of the universe. So Dan and I got on this journey, and we traveled. Let's have a slide to give an image. We traveled into the sunrise and sunset from All Saints Hamworth. That's the Reverend Sergei, a Ukrainian Anglican priest here in London, and that's his church where they collected amazing collection of supplies and goods. If we flick on, this is the destination that we went on, a 1,300-mile journey each way, and there is just some of the forest right on the border of Ukraine, Poland. When we just finished recording the BBC interview, the snow started to fall. I mean, it's hard to describe how cold I was getting out of the van for 20 minutes. The translator we had with us had stood for something like 30 hours waiting to get over the border. There are children doing this. Everyone going over the border are basically women and children. The men are all required to stay back and fight unless they're over 70-something. So you've got women, children standing there in freezing, freezing cold conditions. Let's flick another one on. And these are the places that we managed to drop things off at. There's a couple of the destinations. If you click it, you'll get a bit of a moving image there. So the one on the right was the second drop-off, the final drop-off place, which was an amazing centre that the Polish government had organised. It was a gymnasium that had been converted, and the first one's right on the border, just as people are coming over. Actually, the night before, you'll see on the next slide in a minute, was our very first drop-off. Was with some Ukrainian paratroopers in a sort of hidden warehouse, and they were taking the stuff over the border the next day. So we dropped off a huge amount with them, and you'll see that in a moment on a sort of TikTok image. That's the one on the left there. If you click that, Angie, that's sort of a fast time version of unloading the van. And then we went to the supermarket on the right. Filled up again. That's our interpreter, Vicar, helping out there, and delivered to the 3 locations. And then we filled up the van with 12 adults, 3 children and a cat, and made our way across Europe, dropping off in Warsaw, Hanover, Berlin, and Eindhoven before catching the ferry back as well. And I think the thing that struck me from this more than anything was my traveling companions, Dan and Vicar, and just how amazed by God they were on the journey. It was really extraordinary. Dan was a businessman in Kyiv, and he was invested in 6 different businesses. He had 28 employees. All of them are closed. So on one level, lost everything. His house is, could be being ransacked by Russians next week for all he knows. Hopefully not. But it could be. And yet there's this sort of sense that maybe this is an opportunity for God to work in my life. People along the way going, isn't it incredible how people are helping us? Isn't it incredible what's going on? The Polish whole nation, just extraordinary, generous and kind and receiving, just heartwarming. And what is it that we're sort of seeing? I think what we're seeing is not so much that we all have this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, that is just ours. But what we're getting is a reflection in the middle of the darkness, not of the sun like the moon does, but of actually God's glory reflecting through humankind. And little people are finding themselves touched and moved to respond to God's grace in the middle of a really, really difficult situation. And so I'd love to just play you, if I can, on that slide you've just got up, Angie. I'd love to play you this little video of Dan talking on the ferry on the way home. We'll need the sound on for this.
Okay, I was going to wait for this lady to stop talking.
Just
but she's talking
pause it a
in
sec.
that language.
Pause it a sec. So we've got onto the ferry, and we missed our ferry because we were dropping off people in places where they wanted extra help. And at the end of these days, this is what Dan had to say about the trip and the journey.
Well, first of all, we are on the Calais ferry going home, so this is actually the last update. We splashed out for the upper class cabin because it's 15 quid for lunch downstairs, and you get lunch free here for 15 quid. And coffee and tea and really comfy couches to sleep on. In a minute, that's going to be my bed. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick plug. I plugged Rich's church on the radio, on the television. I plugged our trip on the radio and on the television. Now I'm going to plug God on Facebook, which people who know me will find that quite weird. But so I kind of keep religion and ideally politics out of Facebook. But I have to say, this trip has been amazing, exhausting, and very strange. It's almost like we had a Inspector Gadget. You know, in James Bond films, where James Bond always gets the gadgets he needs exactly to take on the bad guy. So I needed a driver in a minibus, and that showed up on very short notice in the form of Rich and a minibus. And then we needed we started driving, and we broke down. I'm going to try and go through this sequence of weird. So I got on the train in Portsmouth, and my train was late, but the conductor showed me how to get cheap tickets and get off at Woking and get a taxi to Rich's house for less than the price of a train fare to Waterloo. We arrived at Rich's house, having not seen him for 26 years. We arrived at exactly the same time. Like, he was turning in as I was getting out of the taxi. And we were both 20 minutes late, so it wasn't like we arrived at the allotted time. Everything went smoothly until our AdBlue disaster, which those who have been following along will be familiar with. But what did we need then? We needed a mechanic. We had no way to get one, so we ran into an English-speaking gas station attendant in the middle of Belgium who looked the least likely English-speaking person in the world, and yet he got us a Wesley who came out on 20 minutes notice, RAC, take note, and got our bus working, not properly, but just enough that we could get to the Peugeot garage in Krakow, who told us it would take 3 days, possibly more, to fix, until our translator showed up with a guy she knew who spoke Polish, and suddenly 2 hours later we were on the road in a fixed van. And then we went to the border and got rid of just the right amount of stuff. It's gone into the perfect place for her. We even had a walkie-talkie. The guy literally said to me, "We need a walkie-talkie," and we had one in the car. So every little step of the way, just what we needed. It was like James Bond was script writers were writing the script for our film. And then we do that. We go there, we get people, we start bringing them back towards Ukraine and towards the West rather. And again, along the way, every little thing that needed to happen. We never ran out of petrol. We never came close. When we wanted to give people help, they accepted it reluctantly and gratefully. But it was always just the right amount of help. Whether it was a teddy bear for a little girl, or just enough money to get a room for the night, or thing. And then another example: we were going to a hotel, and a girl was feeling unwell. She needed to stay the night in Berlin with a friend, and they didn't have a COVID certificate. And Rich prayed, asked his wife to pray, that somehow we would be able to get this girl the room that she needed, the shelter that she needed for the night. And a minute and a half later, I realised I had a COVID certificate written in Cyrillic. And as I said to Rich, you want to talk about miracles? Germans bending the law, miracle. But we got to go to the room for the night. And every step along the way, we came back, we got the ferry, we missed our boat, we're on the ferry now, every step of the way. And I think there's something in the scripture that says he shall provide. So anyway, I don't know, I just feel like it's worth putting out there. We always hear from people of devout faith and awesomeness that God does amazing things. I'm just a regular guy who decided to take some food for people in his country to the border where they were crossing, that I crossed over, and I didn't really expect that everything I needed would be provided for me. And it's humbling, it really is, and it makes me think. So, that's my witness, that's my testimony. Take it for what it is, it's completely true, there's photos and a man of the cloth to validate it along the way. But that's my testimony. Everything I've needed on this trip has been provided. I'm going back before that when I was getting out of Ukraine. Every step of the way, we were one step ahead of Putin the entire way. Passports, visas, travel plans, everything. Maybe there's something in this. Think about it.
It's a great testimony. I think Dan's watching this evening as well, so big hi, Dan, Tatiana. You know, when Jesus said, "I'm the light of the world," there was someone around in his age who thought he was the light of the world as well. Caesar thought he was the sun, the one who was worthy of worship. What happened to Caesar? The little rock gradually destroyed him. Every culture, empire comes and goes. In fact, our fading culture that we're in now is going to come and go as well. But the word of the Lord endures forever. Jesus remains the light of the world forever. Not a little candle, but something far mightier than the sun. That's who you put your faith in. That's who you put your trust in. Just one final slide, if I may. Just that sort of thing of how can you get involved. You may have picked up this wonderful new initiative called the Global Sanctuary Foundation, which has Chris Candier's name all over it. And Chris is the initiator of all new things in the UK. This particular campaign is to help get Ukrainians into the country. And that's where you can pledge to say, I've got a room and I'd love someone to come and live with me. And there's already 10,000 churches signed up, so don't feel too guilty. There's more churches signed up than the Home Office will allow in already. But it's nice to communicate to the Home Office that we actually do want people. And to communicate to the Ukrainians as well that you're loved. You know, my cousin in Spain, she's already got a Ukrainian living with her in her flat. It'd be good to communicate to our government that we want to be generous. And on the right, that's SOMA, Sharing of Ministries Abroad. And actually, one of the most amusing things of the trip was when we put out a prayer request to the SOMA database, and there was almost immediately an email back from this extraordinary bishop from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which you may or may not know about. It's not in the news at all. But it's been through horrific war, and I won't go into the details, but, you know, just every horror of war. So he's a displaced person in North Uganda at the moment, and his people are there, but they haven't got what they need to stay there, so they're going to go back into the war zone where they're really, really in danger. So our next trip is going to be to North Uganda to try and meet with him and others in these camps, and there's others from South Sudan who've come from there as well. So we want to try and amplify the voices of those who are forgotten in the world, as well as those who are in the international news at the moment. Again, in Nabil, all of the Syrians coming into Lebanon. So let's not forget the people that the news moves past. But amazingly, because he is the light of the world, our little lights do shine when they reflect his glory. It's not our own light that we're shining out, but it's his light that we're reflecting. And when we gaze on him, that goes back to people and it transforms lives like it's transformed Dan's life over these last few days. God bless you. Thank you for listening. Amy never cut me off. I gave her permission to cut me off, so thank you for bearing with me. And Zoe, back to you.